Welcome to our podcast, Chat with Junko and Bola. My name is Junko Yoshida, Editor-in-Chief of the Ojo-Yoshida Report. In each episode, we invite a subject matter expert for conversation. We ask probing questions to provide our listeners insight and clarity on the news of the moment.
Let me tell you, FSD has some competition in China. It might be blue ocean in Europe and the United States, but that's not going to be the case here in China. We have companies like Huawei, NIO has their own version, Li Auto has their own version, and it's not going to be a premium service that Tesla is going to be able to charge high margin for here in China. And so unless Tesla's FSD is far superior, which I don't believe it is.
So we have a special guest today with the Chat with Junko and Bola. We got Tu Li, who is the founder and managing director of Sino Auto Insights.
That's right.
Yeah, nice to have you back, too. And you are actually calling in from Shenzhen today, right?
I am. So apologies for my background. It's a little bit plain, not as cool as yours, Bola. You could probably up your game a little bit in the background, but it's great seeing you both. And, we have a lot to talk about, don't we?
Yeah. You said that you've been in China for about a month. Did you say that?
It will be. So I've been in China almost 3 weeks now.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so, God, like I'd mentioned this before we started recording, but God bless my wife because she has the two boys and allows me to go kind of play and do some crazy things. I don't know if you saw this, but 2 days ago, I had just gotten done driving from Beijing to Shenzhen in an electric vehicle.
Right.
An Xpeng G9. So I can tell you a little bit about that as well.
That is great. So what was the purpose of that drive? Please explain. And whose car are you driving?
So I do a podcast called Chinese EVs and More, as you both know, and my co-host Lei Xing, he's also here. And we both needed to get to Shenzhen. We wanted to think about the most complicated, longest journey that we could take. And so we decided we're going to borrow a car. Actually, so two things. We wanted to take that long drive in an EV cross country in China and experience it for ourselves. Right. And then number two, and this is very apropos just because Tesla is on the verge of getting FSD approved. Xpeng has their own version of full self-driving called X-NGP.
Right.
And we wanted to test that system out. It's a level 2+ system that on the highway, it can work 99% of the time. And then in certain cities, because of the HD map requirement, it only works in a few cities, like a handful of cities currently. But and Xpeng was kind enough to lend us a G9 Performance, which is their top end of the biggest vehicle that they sell currently. It's a 5-seat SUV, beautiful car. And it was 1,500 miles, about 2,500 kilometers. We took 3 days from Beijing and then stopped in Zhengzhou the first day. The second day, stopped in Changsha. And then third day, ended up here in Shenzhen. This was 2 days ago. So my butt and my back are just starting to recover. But it was a terrific experience. And, if I'm lucky enough, maybe the three of us can go on a Europe north to south EV trip. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that would be great. That would be fantastic. What would be the differences, right?
Yeah, no, we have to experience that, I think, because it'll change every year as more charging infrastructure, as better vehicles. And so being able to say, I experienced it when it was pretty rough, I think will give me a lot of perspective when things get much better and easier and faster and cheaper.
Tell us, what are the surprises when you made this long trip in terms of the situation with charging stations or the actual ability to, you can go hands-free certain portion of highway?
For the sake of full disclosure, Xpeng was just kind enough to lend us the car. We weren't paid. So, and I'm given editorial freedom. There's no restrictions on what I can say, what I can't say, what I can show you. But certainly out of respect for Xpeng, you know, just being honest is probably the best thing I can do for them.
Yeah.
And um, over 90% of the miles or kilometers that we drove were using the intelligent driving system. And I'm super impressed. And let me tell you, FSD has some competition in China. It might be blue ocean in Europe and the United States, but that's not going to be the case here in China. We have companies like Huawei, NIO has their own version, Li Auto has their own version, and it's not going to be a premium service that Tesla is going to be able to charge high margin for here in China, because as you both know, closely following the Chinese EV sector and the silicon chip sector, you know, it's a race to the bottom a lot of the times when it comes to price here in China. And so unless Tesla's FSD is far superior, which I don't believe it is, they won't be able to charge too much for it. So I think that could be a potential challenge for them.
So how do you define the intelligent, did you say ITS, intelligent
intelligent driving system?
Driving, so,
okay. You know, because we can say semi-autonomous. I won't say autonomous, it's semi-autonomous.
Right.
You still need to supervise. There's a camera on the A pillar on the driver's side. That's effectively a DMS or a driver monitoring system. So if you're looking down at your phone, if you're looking away for too long, but then also driving on the highway, at least, you have to have your hand on the steering wheel, or it will alert you on the screen that you need to shake the steering wheel. So you have to be aware. You have to be looking at the road, but we're going between, on the highway or the Gaosu, we're going between 90 kilometers and 120 kilometers an hour. We went to the speed limit effectively, and it can change lanes on its own. It can exit on its own.
Yeah.
Well, with supervision. I won't say on its own, with supervision. But again, the miles that we didn't drive using the system were city miles, because it was either restricted or it was kind of late at night and we were just wanting to get to our destination kind of thing. So generally speaking, there are a couple situations that we needed to take over. None of them were on the highway. And so the crazy thing about intelligent driving systems, good enough is not good enough, because you know, people lives are involved, so you need to be at that 99.99999, you know, 8 sigma 9 sigma kind of thing, right? And so as a level 2 system, I was completely impressed. I've used FSD before, and you know, I was pretty impressed with that. And I've ridden in a number of robotaxis, so I'm not new to an intelligent driving system. But 1,500 miles, Junko and Bola. So for there not to be any close calls where I would say I felt like I was in danger. I mean, there were some close calls, like we came super close to maybe like maybe like an inch away from something, but you know, it did it. It did it. But but sometimes that's just an uneasiness, right? So
let me ask you 2 things related to this intelligent driving system. When I hear is that some parts in China, they do have a special lane reserved for autonomous vehicles. Is that the case, or have you seen any of that at all while you're there?
No, no.
Oh.
So there are special districts
Mm-hmm.
in for instance, in Beijing, south of the city center, southeast of the city center, there's a district called Yizhuang.
Okay.
And that specifically, that district is set up specifically to pilot robotaxi.
I see.
And so part of that is so that there's depot centers for all of the autonomous vehicle companies to park their autonomous vehicles. Number one. Number two, they'll have intelligent traffic systems, light
Right.
and things of that nature, so that these vehicles communicate with the lights as well. Okay,
Okay.
so they'll set up those specifically in order to do testing.
I see.
Now, but that's more for robotaxi.
I
Okay,
see. Yeah, yeah. And we're talking about V2I system then, vehicle to infrastructure, that
that's
is
right.
made available in that special district. Because my understanding is China is really advanced in terms of, in terms of advanced thinking, that how they want to leverage infrastructure to assist the intelligence in driving. So,
Who were the main contributors of all of the parts that came together in that vehicle?
Are you talking about the physical hardware, sensors, and things like that?
Yes.
I That's a terrific question, Bola, and I should have done my homework. I do know that there were so NVIDIA was driving the autonomous systems. Qualcomm was in charge of the infotainment. Okay,
yeah,
I believe in Xpeng. Don't get upset at me. I think it's Hesai that had the two lidar in the front.
yeah.
But Xpeng has developed the X-NGP themselves. So
Mm.
that's their system. And I'll be quite honest with you, and I'm probably oversimplifying this, but the radar, the sonar, the cameras, to me, that's moving towards commoditization. And so maybe the LiDAR is still a differentiator, but there's so many sensors, 30, 40 sensors, that there's a lot of redundancy going on. Okay. And so these are more or less fail safes because of of the nature of one vehicle getting into a serious accident could derail the entire sector.
Right.
The maps were Gauda, I believe, but the AI intelligence was NVIDIA Orange. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And then Qualcomm was the silicon they used for controlling the infotainment.
IVI. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So we will come back some of the technology elements, but let's go back to the original intention that I had, was that what did you find at the Beijing Auto Show? And tell us, what are the surprises for you? Somebody like you have been experienced with the Chinese EV scene for a long time. What surprised you?
So each of these shows, there's always sometimes when you go to the Detroit Auto Show or the LA Auto Show, it just kind of feels like Groundhog Day. It's kind of the same thing, not a ton of excitement. There might be one or two major pressers where a major unveil happens. In China, in Shanghai, and in Beijing. So Beijing hadn't happened for 3 years, I think. And so last year was at Shanghai, and there was this feel like surprise because the uh, foreign leadership at a lot of these companies hadn't been to China in 3, 4, 5 years. So the suddenness of seeing all the green plates, all these amazing vehicles that are now competing directly for Chinese consumers alongside their products, and that they believed fully that they were competitive in the China market. They, the king has no clothes on. So that was kind of a surprise moment last year for a lot of the Europeans. This year, one of the big impacts. So just my observations, or just initial set of observations, a lot of German being spoken. So I found out that Germans can now enter China visa free for 40 days.
Oh,
So
wow.
companies took advantage of that. And so there were busloads of Volkswagen employees I heard that were flown to China. Okay. Chery invited a bunch of partners from other countries to come and be a part. So the other thing I saw, I went to the BYD presser, tons of Latin American media,
Wow.
tons. So that tells you how important the Latin American market is going to be for BYD.
BYD, yeah.
And then this year, Buick, Chevrolet, Cadillac, Volkswagen, BMW, they all, Porsche. They might not have had global debuts, but they had China debuts for their vehicle. And in Shanghai, foreign automakers were largely absent from launching new products.
Okay.
Okay, so you almost look like last year we got hit in the mouth pretty good. This year we're coming back. Now, are those first set of products likely to be competitive from a pricing, feature, and design standpoint? Likely not. But guess what? It's step number one. And it's kind of communicating to China that you are an important market to us. We will not give up on you. And this is our first effort, but it's not going to be our best effort. And so, take without getting into specific vehicles, that's kind of how I looked at it. Media in general, companies like Geely had invited a lot of media from outside of China. And unfortunately, some of them weren't able to get their visas correct. There's always challenges with visas and challenges with tickets and media passes. But that's less about a coordinated effort from the Chinese government.
All right. So that the Western car makers coming back to the auto show, especially in Beijing, that's actually the news that I hadn't heard. That's very interesting. But at the same time, let's talk about Chinese OEMs or the technology suppliers. I hear stories about Huawei doing stuff. They have several different booths, and also naturally Xiaomi was the headline grabber anyway. So tell me about the Chinese technology and vehicle companies that caught your eyes.
Xiaomi sucked all the air out of the room. And Lei Jun was a rock star.
Yeah.
There were still crowds at Neo, Xpeng, because they were right next to Volkswagen, and Volkswagen had acquired that 5% stake in Xpeng, so they had a lot of folks. And excuse me, but yeah, Huawei was there, but they're kind of sort of an Intel inside strategy as opposed to upfront. And they have several partners, right? And most of them are state owned. So they've made some announcements about with Voya, with ArcFox. Their thing is being front and center, competing against full self-driving. That's going to be their thing in the China market for sure. And I almost feel, which is unfortunate, because some of the vehicles and the products that some of these state-owned brands are launching are pretty significant, and some of them look pretty good. But I don't know if they can stand up to the Huawei brand and how aggressive they're being, because if I'm an automaker that is potentially partnering with Huawei, I don't want Huawei to outshine me. And so especially if they're partnering with 2 or 3 or 4 brands. How is their system different than Bola's system, who's also partnered with Huawei, or Junko's system, who also partner with Huawei? Is there going to be a real difference besides what the physical design looks like? So, lots going on, and there's a lot of innovation still going on the lidar side, on the battery side.
Huawei is not a car brand. It's not a car brand. It makes the underlying technology mostly chips, right? Is that correct?
Right.
Right? So
Well, hardware and software,
hardware,
so they're doing both. Yeah.
And they're gunning for the autonomous vehicle. That's what you said.
I think autonomous, but also kind of the operating system and kind of the backbone of the
I
vehicle.
see. So they're really going for
Yeah.
the full stack then. I mean, Huawei. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they are less about kind of the front infotainment side, but they
Right.
do also have a solution for that, right?
Right.
So I look at Huawei more like a turnkey solution for
Okay.
an EV brand.
Yeah.
And we always have to remember that generally speaking, and we're starting to see, because AI, machine learning, that's very still in its infancy, right? So this whole idea that more and more data is better. I think generally speaking, that's true,
Yeah.
but it doesn't help with edge cases. So we still need a lot of data on the edge cases, and then as we understand more about AI, machine learning, maybe there's better ways to do it, as opposed to just driving millions and millions and millions of kilometers to gather the data.
Right.
And but I think the general rule of having more vehicles on the road is better than having less.
Of course.
And remember that Tesla already has 1.6 million cars in China on the roads.
Right.
Okay, so every day those vehicles gather data. Now, who holds on to that data, where that data goes, whether it crosses borders, that still needs to be all sorted out. It's probably not going to cross a border, but how's it going to be managed?
Yeah, Elon went to China to have discussions with the premier, right? It was in Shanghai, I think, last Sunday.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And he can't give other people the spotlight for too long, I guess, because he came right during the auto show, right? It couldn't have been a day or two before. It couldn't have been a day. It had to be like opening day of the auto show, right? So
would you say that then it was all about EVs and AVs, right?
I would say it was more about EVs. The AVs came in just because Elon, I think, and FSD, because we should separate Bola to compare it to apples and apples, right? Because AV, I think you mean autonomous vehicle.
Right.
And we're still years away from an autonomous vehicle. Now, electric vehicles with intelligent driving systems, we're probably 18, 20 months away from a good number of them having at least level 2 in a Chinese vehicle. Okay, we're probably less than 3 years away from 30, 40, 50, 60% of the new vehicles in China, even under 300,000, or even under 40,000, having some sort of intelligent driving.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that'll become commonplace very soon.
Yeah.
But autonomous, I think I want to be able to separate that, because I don't want to be looked at like, oh man, he's using the wrong terms to say all these things. Okay.
I guess the other part to my question is, does that mean that ICE vehicles are basically dead in future for China?
Last month, I think the last 2 weeks of the month, over 50% of the vehicles sold in China were NEVs. And NEV stands for New Energy Vehicle. BYD sold just over 3 million cars last year. I want to say it was a 55-45 split, maybe 60-40 split between battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. So NEV, or New Energy Vehicle, equals battery electric plus plug-in hybrid plus fuel cell electric. Now, fuel cell is hydrogen, another word for hydrogen. Hydrogen is very, 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 very small number. So NEVs, and it's a China only term. Europe doesn't use NEV, and the United States doesn't use that acronym. So when we talk China, I'll always try to specify NEV.
Yeah.
But some people will confuse the two and just call them BEVs. And especially now that hybrids are becoming a larger portion of clean energy vehicles, I think it's important to kind of separate all that stuff out. And I'm just trying to be accurate in how I describe
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
for both of you. Okay. When I first moved to China in 2009, we had to put our names into a lottery because they were only giving out 20,000 license plates a month for the city of Beijing. And we never won the lottery, so we never bought a car. In Shanghai, it's an auction.
Yeah.
And there were months where a license plate might cost you 150,000 RMB or maybe 25,000 US dollars to buy a license plate for the right to own a vehicle. Right. So to your point, Junko, they're really restricting because everybody wanted to buy a car. And there was already traffic jams, there was already pollution. Now, when it came to NEV and creating these incentives, there was a while where if you bought an NEV, you could get a license plate. You didn't have to do the lottery or wait in line.
Gotcha.
Okay, that's gone away now.
Okay.
I think in Shanghai, only BEVs, you can still get a license plate. I believe that's right. So you used to be able to do it with a PHEV as well. You can't do that anymore. And recently there was a subsidy or an incentive that if you traded up, bought or traded in an ICE for an EV, you'd get a 10,000 RMB credit. And so right now they're trying to goose the economy a little bit and trying to keep manufacturing going for NEVs. And then if you have an NEV that's older than 6 years old, you trade that in, you get a 7,000 RMB credit or subsidy. So there's still some subsidies, but the subsidies that initiated it, we're talking 30, 40, 50,000 RMB. So quite significant in the early innings. Right. Not dissimilar to what the US is doing with the Inflation Reduction Act.
Right.
And Europe, yes. So the idea that China is the only one that is kind of putting their thumb on the scale is ridiculous to me.
Right.
If we could all acknowledge that in order for new technologies like clean energy vehicles to be widely adopted, governments have to play a role, right? Look at Norway, look at Europe. Yeah. And we're only in a year and a half into the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah. That hasn't even really begun to create momentum yet.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's see where that goes in 5 years. Now, the constraint that Europe and the United States had is that there weren't a lot of 40,000 euro EVs or plug-ins.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's the little bit of the chicken and the egg, and it creates this need for affordable Chinese EVs to come to Europe and the United States.
Yeah.
If the European Union and the United States are going to reach their climate goals, that's really the only way.
Yeah.
Or we need to step away from these aggressive climate targets, right?
Yeah. Interesting. So in terms of the technologies that are available or being developed in China, what motivates European or American or the Japanese, Korean car makers to team up with Chinese vendors? Are there any technology superiority that China offers? I mean, can we sort of talk about that? Because we are beginning to see that a lot of, I think you used the term bifurcation, but you're beginning to see that many Western car companies are actually having to develop two different paths, roadmaps for their own EVs, one in China and one for the rest of the world. But what makes them to want to partner with Chinese? What is the incentives?
Let me describe this on an exception basis.
Yeah.
The only thing that I think, generally speaking, the West is still superior than China is on AI chips. You know, and maybe certain control trips. Because if you think about it, LiDAR, dominated by Chinese companies, Tesla, RoboSense, Innovision, you name it, right? Sensors, those are a little bit commoditized, right? Cameras, DJI, is one of the best camera companies, drone companies, and so we should look at that as a bifurcation, but also look at it like, Bola, this goes back to your question about, is it over for ICEs? In China, for the most part. Now, the lower tier cities are going to buy ICEs for quite some time. As long as Ukraine and Russia are in a war, Russia's going to need ICE vehicles. And so a lot of overcapacity actually goes to Russia because the Western automakers.
Wow.
So a lot of those exports are going to Russia, right? They talk about all these numbers of exports, 3/4, 80% are still ICEs. They're going into Latin America. They're going into Russia. They're going into Eastern Europe. So Southeast Asia. So EV, to me, doesn't have that overcapacity that everybody's worried about. It's still on the ICE side, at least in China. Significant overcapacity on the ICE side.
Interesting.
And part of it because historically it's always had an overcapacity, but the second part, and Bola, this goes to your question again, it's because ICE demand fell off a cliff so quickly.
In automotive, does it still make sense to talk about East-West divide in terms of technology rather than talk about it in terms of market penetration and size?
We should, because think of it this way, Bola. Volkswagen and Toyota, they used to be kind of, let's just say more Toyota than Volkswagen. They used to be some of the more efficient product development OEMs, okay? Where it used to take 5 years when I was working in the automotive space, a long time ago. Toyota got it down to 3 years. These Chinese EV brands are getting it down to 14 months. So think about, you're a European, you're a Chinese EV brand, or you're a European brand that wants to sell EVs in China, Bola. Are you gonna, if the European suppliers can't keep up with that pace, where you got to source from? You got to source from the Chinese suppliers who are now fit because they've been supplying to the Chinese EV brand. Okay, so the bifurcation is also because of the fitness and the capabilities of these Chinese suppliers that were basically forced to get faster, more efficient, better if they wanted to keep contracts with some of these Chinese brands. Okay, so the bifurcation, Junko, is going to be driven by data, by silicon, by national security, and all these other things. But guess what? It's also going to be driven by, man, I can't source from X German supplier because they are slow as molasses, and I will miss out on my 16-month product development window because they can't get me the part in less than 20 months. So when this is where it's always one-sided because the governments always talk about fairness and protectionism, but they're in a lot of instances they're just out innovating. And as an American who just moved back to Detroit, we are still not prepared. The suppliers are not prepared to compete like this. Now, again, get back to the beginning of what I said. It's their first effort. this Beijing Auto Show. But, historically, speed kills, and the speed at which Chinese EV companies move is going to kill a lot of legacy brands potentially, at least in the China market. Now, will Citroen and Peugeot live forever in France? Probably, but anywhere outside of that, they're definitely not going to survive in China in current form.
Thanks for tuning in to our latest chat with Junko and Bola. Register at www.Ojo-Yoshida Report.com and you will have free access for your first 2 months to in-depth news and analysis that you can't find anywhere else.